It's Andrew White with Everything's Bigger, the inside story of the people and power shaping Texas today. And today, I'm speaking with Joseph Kopser, a 20-year Army veteran graduated from West Point Academy. He then became an entrepreneur for 13 years. When he moved to Texas, the very first woman he met, he made his wife. And so this is an exciting time for Joseph. He's running in House District 47. That's Vicki Goodwin's current seat. As you may know, Vicki's running for lieutenant governor. And so it's a competitive primary, though. I fully support Joseph. I think he'd be an incredible legislator. And listen to this conversation to find out why. Hey, everybody, it's Andrew White with Everything's Bigger. I'm excited to bring today Joseph Kopser, who's running for Texas House District 47. Before I give the background and tell you how we know each other, we got to start off with the most important question of the entire conversation. Really easy. This is just a total softball. What's your favorite chili con queso and why?
My favorite chili con queso is probably over at Torchy's. It's basically important for a couple of reasons. Number one, about 5 or 6 years ago, it opened up one of the biggest locations in all of Austin near us. It's become a gathering place for a community. It's got a great, huge back patio, which is where I take my little 8-pound fluffer noodle known as Flossie, who is a multi-poo. And so between the Austin Beer Works Pearl Snap, their chili con queso, I can have meeting after meeting after meeting talking to folks, and it's a great time.
Hey, Torchy's queso is legit, and I think you're okay coming out with that because it's based in Austin.
Yes.
So it's a great Austin story of success, starting in a food truck and making its way international. Oh my gosh, what a great pick! So background here is when I ran for governor in 2018. Originally, you were running for Congress.
That's right.
And we would cross paths at various different events, and I was blown away with how well you could speak to these crowds. I mean, you brought the heat. And I remember coming to one particular event. It was a Saturday morning. I was tired, and I didn't have the energy. You went first, and you got up there with like 125% level and just knocked it out of the park. And I was thinking to myself, how am I going to follow this guy? And really enjoyed following you and getting to know you on the.
I appreciate you bringing that up. In fact, during my days in the private sector, like you as an entrepreneur, being able to build companies and to pitch ideas, the idea of selling democracy requires many of the same skills of motivation and inspiration that it did when I was selling the idea of my company. In fact, once we were able to sell my company to Ride Scout was a company, sold it to Mercedes, I got picked up on the speaking circuit at a lot of conferences. And I noticed after a while, they were always putting me in the 8 a.m. slot after breakfast because I figured out after a while that they used me as kind of their cheerleader to get the conference started. I took that as a compliment. I feel bad for the front row people that were not early morning people that needed their first cup of coffee before I hit them. But no, I appreciate you bringing up that memory.
Yeah, or the poor SOB had to come in after you. You bring the heat. Okay, so before we dive into your political career and what you're doing today, I really want to talk about what you've done in your history. And 20 years in the military really stands out. I've got nothing but respect for that. But
thank you.
But tell me, what was your journey like? How did you get started? And tell me a little bit about your path.
Yeah. So I mean, really, to understand me is to know that I am the complete sum, if you will, of all the coaches, teachers, and mentors that I've had along the way that kind of helped shape me as to who I am today. I've always been a problem solver, always been a tinker. Those little kits when you're a kid and the little science kits or whatever it was. I love taking things apart and putting them back together again. It's why I ended up being an aerospace engineer at West Point. I love the science and the mechanics behind the way things work. And then from there, in the 20 years in the Army, like you alluded to, it was really a combination between the muddy boots side of the Army, which people are familiar with movies and such, a couple of trips to Iraq. But I also got involved in a part of the Army that not everybody sees. It's on that strategic side or the future side, developing the policy that underlines it. And what that allowed me to do is see just how hard it is to do things at the big strategic policy level. And then translate what those are later to soldiers when I was back in line units and leadership. So that constant rinse, repeat was really a great training ground for me to go into the private sector. So not only was I then building companies, very small companies and ideas, and helping others build on their companies, but also working with large strategics or institutional investors or high net worth people to figure out how to translate this idea that this young entrepreneur has to this bigger thing. And I think all those same skills of trying to fix things and being a communicator served me well in running for Congress when you and I met. And when all the dust settled there in 2018, we actually received more votes than any candidate running as a Democrat in congressional midterm elections in the history of Texas politics. You don't hear about that much because we lost in a very gerrymandered race to Chip Roy. But what that taught me was those 2.5 points we lost by is that we need to engage more people. We need to get more people involved in the process and then focus on the kitchen table issues like jobs, education, our kids' future that everybody mostly has in common. And so that background, after 2018, after that race, I went back into the private sector, continued to work on building companies and workforce education and everything that I was doing before. I was just doing it going forward in the private sector. And now with this open seat left by Vicki Goodwin going to run for lieutenant governor gives me the chance to return to public service and be able to take all those life experiences and get things done for Texas families.
Man, I really respect and appreciate your life of public service. And I'm curious more about the military side, just what lessons it taught you, maybe some specific stories. I'm assuming, did you go to West Point?
I did. Graduate from West Point in 93.
That's incredible. So, I mean, we hear about being a plebe?
Yeah. Your freshman year kind of sucks.
I mean, you're 18 years old. Next thing you know, you got like 17 people yelling and screaming at you, and you turn into a man pretty quickly in this process. Give us a little bit of some of the highlights, maybe some of the lowlights.
Yeah.
What it was like going through West Point and then your early career in the military.
Yeah, you that's a nice segue. In fact, your freshman year, your plebe year at West Point, what you learn, first of all, is that you're surrounded by 1,000 other people that want it just as bad, that want to be there, that were doing their best in their hometowns and communities. So you get all these young men and women, all mostly 18 years old, and you're now finding yourself in a way that you have to learn to cooperate to graduate. And so it goes from being an outstanding individual to becoming member of team. And that is a searing experience. You learn very quickly what your personality strengths are, just as you learn very quickly what your personality weaknesses are. And then you just try to have your peers lean on them to help you shape and kind of sand off those rough edges, while at the same time leaning in with your skills to be able to lift up others where they might not be as strong as you, and vice versa. And so those early days at West Point, combined with my early years in the Army, where I was just soaking it all in, learning from some of the coolest non-commissioned officers and platoon sergeants and first sergeants I ever had a chance to serve with. And if you're listening, you're able to pick up those wisdom in those nuggets. And then as far as very specific things, there were moments in time, whether you be out in the dirt or out in the dust or out in the mud, and you really got a chance to look over your shoulder left and right, see who was there, see who you could depend on. But when you tie it back all into politics, we came from all different parts of the country. We came from all different ages and stages in life, and we come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And I can't really recall almost any time in 20 years that a person's politics came into A, our job, or B, whether or not you would depend on them. It really was about, could you be dependent on when the chips were down? And so those moments led me really to 3 understandings about what it means now to be a military veteran. And like so many in the U.S., I think it allowed us to do one thing really well, which is to focus on the mission, get things done. Number 2, to work as a team, as I alluded to. And then number 3, and this is the part that is lost on people unless they really understand the military culture, but we deal with very tense situations. We deal with very stressful situations, whether you're in combat, which is the most obvious, or even the less obvious, like leaving your children, leaving your spouse for weeks, if not months, or in my case, like many others in combat, as long as 16 months away from home. That's 16 months. And so in the stress and strain and separation, you learn, hopefully, to not take yourself too seriously, because if you did, you'd never survive that environment. And so really, the 3 things are being able to focus on the mission, work as a team, and then not take yourself too seriously. And that's what I gained most from that early experience in West Point and in the military. And I think it continues to serve and guide as a North Star for me, even still to this day.
What year did you graduate, West Point?
93.
93. Yeah, so we're about the same age.
Yeah.
And I was in Army ROTC, and I remember thinking, the Gulf War had just ended, the first Gulf War. And I remember thinking, this is never going to happen again. There's never going to
So we thought.
And I was like, I'm wasting my time. I'm just wasted. Why am I here? Because war is behind us. And so I did a different path and became a volunteer firefighter. But my friends who stayed in, they, participated in some of the more difficult combat missions that were out there. And oh my God, little did we know there was so much more ahead of us.
Unfortunately, as long as there are people on this planet, there will always be bad actors, and there will always be a need for a military, which is why I'm proud to have served, but also proud to be able to take that service back, hopefully, to the state legislature, because we still have a number of issues, especially when we talk about the border, we talk about our National Guard, we talk about national security, where hopefully my life experiences will be really quite unique, in fact, among Democratic candidates, and now hopefully one day Democratic members of the legislature that have that military and combat experience.
Yeah. Okay. And so 20 years in, how long have you been out now? And what did you do business wise?
Yeah. So I guess we're going on almost 13 years now, retired from the Army. And the business experience has taken several really cool twists and turns along the way. So first off, like everybody, whether you live in a big city or you live in Austin, Texas, or Houston, Dallas, wherever, traffic is a very, very real part of your life. And so for me, as an inventor entrepreneur living in Austin, Mopac, or AKA the parking lot known as Mopac, really became a source of stress for me in my life. I mean, here I had just spent all this time away from my girls in combat, and I get home and now I'm stuck in traffic, again, not at home with my girls. So I had the inventor's epiphany, if you will, that it seemed with all these new technologies like mobile apps for your phone and different ways that things are connected, that no one had ever connected them all together, like brought together like the Amazon, if you will, the shopping market of all the different mobility options. So that's what we did with Ride Scout. It became not an overnight success, but after a few years, it really got the traction. We were the right technology with the right team at the right time. Then Uber and Lyft got really big, and it wasn't hard to sell what we were doing to aggregate all these services. The car companies all freaked out, like Mercedes and Ford and BMW, Hertz rental car. And they said, well, we need to mitigate some of this risk. So we need to find technologies that we can incorporate in our services and our cars. And that's when Mercedes-Benz first approached us. And then we later sold our technology to Mercedes. But then from there was a really neat launching pad, if you will, to do a couple of things at the same time. So not only did I stay involved in entrepreneurship and helping build companies with our company Grayline Group, but more importantly, I very much turned around and looked back at all those military and veterans coming out of the service themselves, understanding that it was a hard road for me. And I tried to be a bit of a shepherd, if you will, or Sherpa, if you will, to kind of guide them through that. Helped co-found right here in Austin, Texas, an organization, its first chapter outside of Chicago called Bunker Labs, which was focused on taking veterans and teaching them the skills they need to be able to build companies. And now, it's been almost 12 years associated with that organization. It's gone through a number of iterations. And not only, again, helping build those companies, but as an investor myself, but then also had a chance to serve as on the board of directors at the Texas Association of Business, also with the Austin Chamber of Commerce, with an eye towards workforce. I'm a big believer that in order to keep this Texas economic miracle going, we've got to have a trained and ready workforce for it. And groups like Texas 2036 talk about all these red flags we have that we don't have the workers we need for the demands of the technology of the 21st century. And that's what I've had a lot of fun being a part of. So you can kind of see how my military background and the 5 years I spent teaching at the college level inside the military in ROTC have enabled me to take that into the classroom and workforce for the economic opportunities in Texas going forward.
Yeah. So Ride Scout,
Yep.
how much of the last 13 years have you spent on that
Well,
specifically?
that one, after we sold it in 2014, I spent a couple of years involved with them through the earnout.
Yeah.
And then that's actually when I stepped away from the private sector in 2017 when I met you, running for political office to try to push back on what I felt was the divisiveness of our politics as personified by Donald Trump. I've known, followed Donald Trump since I was a kid, read all of his books in the 80s and 90s, and then even watched the first couple of years of The Apprentice until I realized, wait a minute, this guy is all show. It's all just a bunch of hot air. He doesn't believe 3/4 of the things that he says. He's just there to put his name on buildings, products, services, universities, steak brands. And that's when I really found my voice in politics, was to help try to push back on the likes of Donald Trump. And I'm proud of all of the letters that I signed, the business groups I was a part of, helping with the Texas Association of Business in 2017 to push back on the bathroom bill. I mean, there were a lot of things that I got involved with while I was still in the private sector.
What was your 2018 campaign like? I mean, so entrepreneur, right? You're a brand new, successful, exited entrepreneur, and which I think personally is a great tool set for leading a campaign, because everything you need in a campaign are very similar to the things you need in running a successful business. You have to have obviously great leadership. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a plan. You have to have operations. There's sales. There's fundraising. It's the whole kit and caboodle. How would you compare your first campaign to a startup? And what were some of the lessons learned?
The parallels, I talk to audiences all the time. The parallels are just so similar that it's surprising, if not disappointing, that there aren't more entrepreneurs helping with what I call our political industrial complex. When I started in 2017, 2018 timeframe, I mean, it was like 1996 called and they wanted all of their technologies back. We were not using anything in the way of databases and marketing tools and consumer outreach and marketing. I mean, it was as if the political industrial complex was given a playbook and said, okay, candidate, here's the playbook. Go run this like we've been doing it for 20 years. And I pushed back and I was like, wait a minute, we have all these new tools that we've been using in the private sector. Why are you not using it? Like just a simple thing maybe if your viewers might appreciate. So we have the VAN, which is the voter database that the Secretary of State for Texas holds. But we also have databases that talk about who's given what money to what campaigns. And then people have their own particular contact lists on their phone or in their computer. But until 2017, 2018, when I came along, those databases didn't even talk to each other. And sadly, in many cases, they still don't talk to each other. And so without being too nerdy, what I did was take the concepts that I knew about science and tech and engineering and databases, mash these things all together like Frankenstein's monster. And it's one of the reasons why we were super proud that if you kind of go back in the time machine to fourth quarter 2017, those were those last 3 months before all the national parties got involved. And until then, it was just us among Democrats and Republicans, challengers and incumbents. Out of all those hundreds of people running for Congress that year in all those categories, we, Kopser for Congress, outraised every single campaign in the state of Texas in that Q4 report, because we didn't do it like we were told to do it. We did it like it was a business or a startup, with things like budgets and projections and runways. And the entrepreneurs in your audience will recognize those terms. But if you said that to the political industrial folks, they would have just looked at you like, what?
Yeah. The problem set of being an entrepreneur, being a candidate, is so different than anything we ask anyone to do. And so you think, who's the ideal candidate? Well, I mean, it's someone who can juggle a lot of balls and be good at it and not drop any of them. You obviously have to be a great public speaker. Check. You have to know how to organize and motivate a team. Check. You've got to be able to manage and make the right technology decisions. Check. You got to be able to raise money for double damn sure.
Yep.
Check. You've checked all these boxes previously. You were running in an uphill race, and that was a tough race, and you came as close as you could get and closer than anybody else came. And so what you did obviously worked, and now you're applying it to a different race.
That's right.
And one that's just as important, the House District 47. Maybe you could explain a little bit about the geography so people know. I hope
Yeah.
people do not have districts, memorized.
Even people that are in office, I don't know how they keep it
Yeah.
straight
Yeah.
because
So
of all the
tell us
gerrymandering.
what's the boundaries of House District 47, and we'll talk a little bit more about
Yeah,
that.
so if you're familiar with Austin, I'll anchor you on one of the largest portions of the district, which is Southwest Austin, where Circle C is. It goes over a little bit east towards Bowie and Shady Hollow. But then when it goes west, it starts to go up around the western portion of Travis County. So you start to pick up like Oak Hills area, then you go out 71, then you start to get to Bee Caves, and you got Westlake, the Eanes Independent School District, that area. Then you hook it up right, or I guess it'd be north, and then you start heading up north, then you pick up the Lakeway area, parts of Lakeway. Then you've got areas of Hudson Bend. Across the road, you've got Steiner Ranch, and then you keep going up, and then you get up into the Great Hills area, and then you go all the way up and almost get the Domain. So you can kind of see it's kind of a crescent shape, if you will. It's gorgeous country. It's the beginning of the Texas Hill Country in every shape of word. It's cut through in all different places with waterways and the lake and in the river. It really is a gorgeous place, but it's a wonderful portion, especially in the flat portions in the south area of the district. Actually goes, I left off a part where it actually goes almost out to Dripping Springs. It stops right before Nutty Brown Road on 290 for those that know the geography well.
Yeah, that's some great country. Oh my gosh, what a great place to be able to campaign. So Vicki Goodwin's the current state rep there, and obviously she's running for lieutenant governor.
That's right.
This is a district that's been blue for a few.
Yeah, since 2018 when Vicki won it.
But before that, it was fairly consistently red. It sort of can go either way. And so this is actually like a legitimate district. You have a fairly balanced district. So you've got a campaign. This is a primary. It's a competitive primary. This is not a gimme for anybody.
No, absolutely.
And so you have to convince your constituents to vote for you. The first thing that comes to mind when you mentioned 71 was the 71-290 interchange right there in Oak Hill.
Yeah.
And transportation. I mean, you've got a background in transportation. This is where your skill set is. There is an incredible bottleneck of traffic happening right there, and pretty much probably throughout your whole district, but especially right there.
Yeah.
And you're going to be sitting in the state legislature. What are some of the things you can do to advocate for transportation in general, but maybe also some specific things to your district as well?
Well, first and foremost, what we want to be able to do is just keep things moving. And that means literally and figuratively. So not only keep things moving in terms of traffic and working with the Texas Department of Transportation to make sure that everything they've done can mitigate, can lessen as much as possible the impact of that construction. So keep things moving. Secondly, in terms of keep things moving, I want to definitely make sure that we are using all of the tools in the toolkit when we're designing not only this expansion, but future expansion to leave room for moving more people with a more denser way. And what I mean by that is not just traditional metro and commuter buses like we've known them in the past, but I'm proud to have been a part of some new really cool technologies like Fetty right here in Austin, which is a smaller van, 15-passenger van, but it also can be called on demand. And so I want to see the state really flex its muscles and creativity to come up with ways to be able to meet people where they are, to provide that transportation mobility and access for flexibility and reliability. It's one thing if a bus or a commuter tool or some rideshare program can get you out to a location, but it's got to be reliable and get you back. And that's an understanding, I think, that comes with the experience that I've had in transportation. One of the things that we did when we were building this company was earn a reputation for doing this right. In fact, in 2014, our company was recognized by the U.S. Department of Transportation as the Data Innovation Award winner for 2014. So I appreciate you bringing up transportation. It is something that I've spent a lot of time in. And then ultimately, the best thing I think we can do for businesses and owners in the area is just to give them a very transparent time schedule. Just let them know the schedule of when things hopefully going to be completed, to hold the construction companies accountable, and to recognize they're in a hard pinch as well. I mean, some of these projects are huge, and we just want to make sure that business owners and residents in the area have some kind of predictability about the decisions they're going to make.
Yeah, mass transit, great. I'm glad you touched on that. It's obviously got to be accessible. It's got to be reliable. It's also got to be affordable, and it's got to work, not
Yeah.
just affordable for the riders, but it's got to produce an economic benefit. And you mentioned Fetty. I think Fetty is a great example of what we can do in the future, and especially having an entrepreneur sitting in the seat, thinking creatively. And that's what we need more of
Yeah.
that. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is not going to bring the future that we need.
Yeah.
All right. So everyone, I mean, as we speak, are getting these little pieces of paper in the mail right now, and it says healthcare on it, and it's a bill. And if you're a part of the marketplace, your bill just went from, I just spoke at lunch today with somebody whose son was paying about $550 a month. He now has to pay $1,300 a month for the same healthcare that he had last month. This is going to affect many, many Texans, especially in a state that has the highest rate of no insurance whatsoever. Again, you're going to be sitting in this seat. Let's hope, come next year. What do we do about healthcare in Texas?
Yeah. The first thing we have to do, it's been so long since Obamacare started. One of the things that we have to do every time I open my mouth and we all open our mouth, we have to remind everybody listening that when Obamacare came along and the federal government was going to spend dollars in states to be able to make healthcare more affordable for all, Texas and their Republican leaders refused it and have refused it since. So, I mean, it's literally like taking our hard-earned tax dollars, giving it to the federal government. And then when the federal government turns around and says, here, we want to give these dollars back to you for your health care, for your citizens, the state leaders went, nah, no, thank you. We don't want it. And I get it if that was a political stunt for 2 years. I could even see it for 4 years. 6 years? Folks, we're going over 10 years that Texans have suffered because our money is sitting in the U.S. Treasury being given to other states. So every time I talk about healthcare, that's where I want to start first. Secondly, to your point about these premiums going up because of decisions made in Congress last year under the MAGA Republican-controlled House, Senate, and White House. So what's going to happen now is businesses are going to be further impacted. Homes and families are going to be further impacted. And so I see a little bit of light in the end of that tunnel, which is if we can get more of the business community on board to push up and back on Congress and say, why is it the employer's responsibility when we, a particular business, are a good employer and can do it, and another large employer is just not doing it? I mean, you know the story that for years and years and years, Walmart did not provide health care of any kind to its employees, meaning it was the American taxpayer. And the very people that worked for Walmart had to take money out of their paycheck to then pay. I mean, it was just crazy. I want to see a system in which we are moving healthcare responsibilities away from the employer. And the other reason why is so many people I talk to are in a job that is dead end, or they're stuck with it. They don't like the job, but they have to stay because that is where they're currently getting their health care. Mm-hmm. Their employer is providing it for them right now. And even though they have a great idea for the next great company, or they want to be their own entrepreneur and build their own version of Ride Scout, they can't leave because they're stuck with that health care.
They've got healthcare handcuffs.
Healthcare handcuffs. Absolutely. So those are just two things that I want to bring up every time we talk about healthcare to make sure people know it shouldn't be like this.
This was a decision that Greg Abbott made individually 10 years ago, and he turned down what now has totaled to about $110 billion in funding. And I think about that, and I think, well, first and foremost, that's $110 billion of healthcare that people in Texans did not get. So that means people died. Let's just be honest. People died because Greg Abbott wanted to get on Fox News and because it was called Obamacare, and he had to look like the strong, MAGA that he isn't. And so, that's how this whole thing started. And then I started, what are the second order ramifications of that decision? Well, the second order is that's $110 billion worth of revenue that didn't flow through our hospitals.
Yep.
And then what's the third order of magnitude? Well, that's salaries to doctors and nurses and attendants and janitors and, everybody in between, of money that didn't flow. And this is one reason why we've lost so many hospitals in rural areas and on these ex-urban areas. And so you can like it or you can not like it. It doesn't matter. The money was there.
And I will add a fourth to your point, which is, okay, fine. The Republican leadership did not want to accept that $110 billion of our money. And yet, when those uninsured Texans got sick, they still went to the emergency room. We still paid that $110 billion plus, because we all know preventative care is the best way to be able to keep costs down. And then acute care, crisis care in an emergency room is among the most expensive kind of care. So, like every way I look at healthcare and healthcare costs, it just baffles me that we're not telling everyday Texans that the money is there. Your Republican leadership refuses to take it. And I want them to be able to scratch their head, Republican or independent or Democrat, and just say, why? Why are we not taking our money? And it's just inexcusable.
It was also just strange because it was individually Greg Abbott's decision. This was not a vote. This was not anything other than a political decision. 41 other governors said yes, said we'll expand Medicaid, we'll take Obamacare. 41. There's only 50 governors. So
I love bringing up Kentucky, Kentucky is often a red state. Currently, right now, they have a Democratic governor, but it's a red state by every Trump presidential voting definition. They took the money, but they were creative enough to call it Kentucky Care instead of Obamacare. And then a few years ago, Mitch McConnell, when leader of the Senate from Kentucky, many of them were trying to take it away. And people said, you could take away my Obamacare, but do not take away my Kentucky Care. Sure. And it's like,
okay,
it's the same thing.
Okay, we won't take away Kentucky Care.
Anyway.
Yeah. In healthcare right now, I think Mark Cuban's doing some of the most interesting stuff.
He is.
He brings a very nonpartisan view. He did some amazing things with pharmaceutical industry with his Mark Cuban drug company.
Yep.
Again, as an entrepreneur, I don't consider myself in the same category with Mark Cuban, but that's the kind of thought leadership that we need because the status quo doesn't work. The model that we have in front of us, it just doesn't work. You can see all the metrics, right? We spend the most and get the least. We always talk about, Sarah Palin and her death panels and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The fact of the matter is people living in other countries with smaller economies are getting better health care than we're getting. Yeah. So we're getting ripped off. We're getting ripped off by a system. And the third-party paying method that we're all kind of used to, it ultimately doesn't work. If I go to a grocery store and I have a list of things I need to buy, if someone else is paying for them, I may just buy the store. I may not buy as much of the generic store brand. I may buy some of those nice fancy brands and labels and upgrade and move. And maybe I don't need the extra large, but I'll just take it anyway. It's the same thing in healthcare, right? And it's weird to me that come December, I need more healthcare because my deductible's been spent and I need to get something before the next January shows up. I got to use it all. It's not the right incentives, not the right alignment, and not how to build, something as important as healthcare.
Yeah. And something else I learned recently on the campaign trail that's worth repeating is, especially for family owned or privately owned medical practices. So just think small doctor's office around the corner from you. They are having their own healthcare premiums go up so much that even some of them are having to consider closing up shop themselves. In other words, going out of business. The irony that healthcare providers are going out of business because healthcare costs are too expensive just shows that we have got to go back to the drawing board, come together, find out what's best for Texas families, and get something done outside of the political madness.
Yeah. It's too important. Healthcare is too important, and it's different. It's life and death. So there's so much that has to be done, and a ton of work. This is an area where having an entrepreneur, quite frankly, sitting in the legislature would mean a ton. Another area where I think that would be incredible is affordability
Yeah.
right now. Everything costs more than it used to cost, which, okay, that's okay if your income's rising as fast as the costs are rising, and it's not. And so, we're in an affordability crunch, and there's not a whole lot of options out there. What are some of the things that we can do in Texas to help make this a little bit easier?
One of the biggest things we can do, if we can just get more Texans of all political stripes to just look at some of the concepts in the book by Ezra Klein called Abundance, and just remember that oftentimes things are going up in price because availability is going down. And the best example of that is housing. We, as a Texas state with so much land, need to be building more, and we need to be building on existing locations, and we need to be zoning differently so that we can be building more per area of land. And if we can just start there, then great things are going to happen. Secondly, in the area of affordability is we need to go back to voters. We need to go back to leaders and remind them that Trump's immigration stance has become so expensive now, and the toxic nature of his deportations that have gone well beyond criminals and gangs and all the people that he promised. He's now going to the everyday workers and people's communities. And when those people are not there to work, costs are going up because of, again, scarcity. And then the third thing I like to talk about in terms of affordability is, to your point, which is naturally over time, prices will go up. But what we need more in Texas are for wages to go up. And that comes through making sure that you, as somebody that is working in a company, provide more value to either that company, or you, as an independent contractor, are providing more value to your clients, and therefore your income goes up. Which is why I've mentioned at the beginning of this, I've been so involved in workforce education, trying to give people the skills and attributes they need after high school to get well-paying jobs here in the Texas economy. My favorite last example of something that I've been a part of creating is an organization called SWIFT, the Space Workforce Incubator for Texas. So when you think about space and the space industry and rockets going up, people always think about those engineers in the white lab coats on computers designing. That's a teeny, teeny, tiny portion of the overall commercial space industry. What we need more of right now in Texas are the welders and the plumbers and the electricians to not only build the buildings of building the space industry, but literally building the rockets and the satellites that will go up into space. Those are blue-collar, no-collar jobs that are unfilled right now. And if you go to our website, swiftrocket.org, we have our latest report laying out all the different companies and all the different job types that are sitting open right now, well-paying jobs, but it needs a little extra training, a little extra certification. Groups here in Austin, like the Austin Community College, larger groups in the state, like the Texas State Technical College, they're providing these these gateways to this better training. And so in terms of affordability, it's not just making costs go down, but it's also increasing a person's net income. And that's through training, education, and certification. So I'm working both sides of the equation at the same time.
And I also think about the minimum wage, which has been stuck at $7.25 now, I think since 1996. And if you just inflation adjust that, you'd be at $11 or $12 an hour.
Yeah.
So their purchasing power has gone way down. But really, you think about, not a lot of people actually make the minimum wage, and that's fine. I mean, it's important that we have people who make the minimum wage. We take care of them. But my point is this: if you raise the minimum wage, a rising tide lifts all ships. And all of a sudden, if minimum wage is $12 an hour and you were making $13 before, you may be making $16 now.
Yep.
I think that's a really meaningful thing we can do. Of course, to do that, you'd need the cooperation from a few other legislatures in the House and the Senate, and of course, the governor and lieutenant governor. It's a big lift, but there's a lot of people running for these offices right now. This is the season that we're making these decisions, and come November, we might see a different group of people in Austin. But let's hope.
But I think that's I love the point you bring up, minimum wage. That's an area where I see me and my style of leadership and pragmatism different than a lot of other members of the legislature. So minimum wage, Do I think it needs to be raised? Absolutely. If the vote came up, would I support it? Absolutely. But I also know it has become a divisive political issue. So in the meantime, while all that politics is going on very loud and jumping in front of microphones and the whole deal, I'm running straight to ACC. I'm running straight to the Texas State Technical College. I'm running straight to the workforce solution boards that are in the 28 locations around the state. And I'm going to say, what do you all need right now to be doing more for workforce training and education so that we can lift those wages? And I'm glad you brought that up, because that really is a difference between me thinking realistically, where do I wish things were, as opposed to the reality I live in, which is, okay, this is where we are. Now let's go fix the problem, which is providing that training and education for others.
You know, a true progressive is someone who wants to make progress.
Yep.
You know, and progress is progress. It may not be everything you want. It may not be the best solution, but it's a movement in the right direction.
Yeah. I always like saying, I'm a progressive with a little p, because even the word progressive now has been hijacked and people think it's a political movement. It's been fine. Call whatever you want that progressive with a capital P. I'm progressive with a lowercase p, which is I make progress. I get stuff done. And the neat part about it is in industry and in nonprofits, et cetera, I get to point to all these different teams that I've been a part of that have done great things, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of in making that progress and moving the ball down the field.
So one more area that we need to make progress in, there's a ton out there for sure, but a big one, the number one budget item in Texas is education.
Yeah.
This is where we spend our money in Texas. And we're 47th in the nation in spending per student. And the results are pretty, clear that, our schools aren't what they should be. And they're certainly not what they could be if we had the right leadership. What are some of your thoughts on education in Texas?
Yeah. So first of all, we have to remember that you measure a society by how it takes care of its kids. Full stop. You measure a society how it takes care of its kids. And right now, we are not, as a state, living up to that obligation to do right by our kids. They do not have a choice. They are born into circumstances, born into families, born into geographies. And what we should be doing as leadership across the state is to make sure that if we want this economic miracle to continue, we need to have a trained and ready workforce. Sadly, we know right now that barely 30% of all 18-year-olds in Texas are either career or college ready when they leave high school. And that should be alarming. And the good news is there are people listening. There are groups like Texas 2036 that are going after nonpartisan, bipartisan ways to say, look, education should be universal. We should focus not just on K-12, but we also need to remember that in those formative years, in what we would call the daycare years, especially even younger, the more words a child hears in their formative days when their brains are just like doubling, it seems, every week or every month, the more words they hear, the better. And so I am in favor of everything we can do to make sure that early childhood education is funded, early childhood education is plentiful. And on top of all that, I'm fine with parents having a choice, but I am completely opposed to the way the governor and his donors set up this voucher scam where basically wealthy families are already doing fine are going to get more tax dollars given to them as a rebate when they are not addressing what rural Republicans said in this voucher bill, which was, hey, it's all great that you're going to give money for us to be able to take and go to charter schools or private schools or different schools, but we ain't got none in our county. And they have never once truthfully and sincerely answered that question. But, we kind of all know what's happening. For some reason, the MAGA-led Republican legislature of this state is trying to starve our public schools to then point to them and go, aha, you're not performing, therefore we need to take more away. It's so disingenuous. It fires me up. Me personally, I'm the product of public schools. My daughters all went to public schools, K through 12. And so what I'm excited about is the fact that after looking at this problem, especially through the eyes of my daughter, so she was a kindergarten teacher for 5 years after graduating from the University of Texas. She loved working with those littles. I helped move her into her classroom, And sadly, 5 years later, I helped move her out of her classroom because I saw firsthand how little teachers make in Texas. I saw firsthand how overcrowded our schools were. I saw firsthand what little resources they get, especially when some of those kids need extra attention. We're just starving our schools, and we, all Texans, are going to pay that bill long term. There's a book I commend to all of your viewers and readers and listeners. It's called Our Kids by Robert Putnam, and he does long-term longitudinal data analysis, and he shows we're not on a good trajectory. The simplest thing, you asked for some examples. The simplest thing we can do is reinstate after-school programs in our public schools. It keeps kids out of trouble. It gives kids a sense of teamwork. It gives kids a sense of competition and fairness. But if we don't fund after-school programs, when they leave, especially when we have working parents that can't be there to supervise, we just set the conditions for problems down the road. That's one of the easiest first things we can do as we reprioritize education in our state.
I love the fact that your kids went to public schools. Tell me about your family a little bit. How old are they? Where they're at? I saw a picture. You got a lot of kids or a lot of people in your family.
So I've got 3 daughters. Amy and I got married. We met in June 21st, 1994 at Fort Bliss, Texas in El Paso. She was the first woman I ever met in Texas, and later married her when I moved here in 94. And in doing,
women, I mean,
I tell you, my mom, my mom was like, wait, don't you want to meet more people? I'm like, babe, or mom, I said, you got to meet these women from Texas. They're great. But, so Amy and I got married 31 years ago. Our oldest daughter, turns 31 in a month or so, which will be exciting for her. And she is an accountant and married. And my middle daughter was, like I said, formerly a school teacher. Now she's in ed tech. So she stayed in education because she loves it. But she just needed to be in a different position to be able to help. And she's married. And then my youngest daughter lives up in Dallas. She and her boyfriend have been dating now for several years. So 2 ponies from SMU and 1 Longhorn from the University of Texas.
Nice. Okay, now for the listeners, Joseph's wearing a hat, a cowboy hat. I've got my cowboy hat on. Tell us a little bit. Every hat has a story.
So the story of my hats go back to when I was a kid, literally 4 or 5 years old. I've got pictures of me wearing all kinds of hats. My grandfather in the 30s and 40s worked tugboats, and he traveled a lot and just got this amazing collections of hats over the years. And all the way up through high school and whatnot, I was wearing different hats. Then when I got into the Army, the sun was beating down on me so much, especially in Fort Hood and Fort Bliss and Iraq. I was always wearing a hat to try to keep the sun out of my eyes and not get burnt. And for years, I wore a UT Longhorn baseball cap. But when I turned 50, my wife says, no, I know you like hats, but we're going to up your game. I was resistant at first, but I'm really glad that I took her advice, and we went down to Malfray on South Congress in Austin, picked out 2 different open roads. This is the hat made famous by LBJ. One was the straw hat that I'm wearing now, and the other is the felt hat for when more fancy occasions when I go out. But I love wearing hats. It's just kind of the signature of who I am. And, for people that don't see me without a hat, they almost don't recognize me because normally I'm always wearing a hat.
I bet you can wear a cowboy hat in the state capitol, and I hope that you will be. So.
Oh, yeah. I've been there to the state capitol for many different ceremonies or times or places and events, and I've always had my Stetson and hope to be able to keep it going there too.
It's appropriate. Okay, so I mean, obviously, I am super happy to endorse you for this campaign. I would love
Thank you. I'm honored
sitting in that seat. But people who are listening, people who are watching, if they want to help, how can they help? What's your website address? What are some things people can do? Obviously, dollars mean a ton, especially right now. This is the time where your money can actually affect the race. So what's your vision on that? Yeah,
so for anybody and all of your viewers that are just tired of the politics of usual, they're just tired of the divisiveness, we represent an outside approach. So we're an outsider campaign, been like you mentioned, in the military and in business for years. So you can find more about us at Kopser for Texas. That's KOPSER for Texas.com. I bought the domain for for and a domain for FOR. So whether you get it right or wrong, you'll get to our website, as well as misspelling my last name. As any good entrepreneur knows, you want to make it as easy and frictionless as possible. So even if you misspell my last name, you'll still get to the website. But from there, we really would love help with 3 areas, which is people's time, treasure, and talent. So in terms of time, knocking doors. We've got a cool app called the Reach app that allows people, if they just want to sit at home, we can help you learn how to use this app. It'll identify for you voters that you may know in House District 47. If you just reach out and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you lived in HD 47. My friend Joseph Kopser is running. Or I've never even met Joseph Kopser, but I heard him on this podcast with Andrew White. I would love for you to learn more about him. And so you can be part of that. In terms of talent, I'm really looking for all experts of all fields. You know, we have a lot of problems we have to go out and solve right now. And so I want to hear from voices, and not even voices I may agree with, but I want to hear experts from all different industry and different perspective. And then lastly, as you said, treasure. We have to communicate with voters. And my opponent, who is the former chair of the Travis County Democratic Party, she's well known for her work there. But beyond her work there, in the Travis County party politics of the Democratic Party, neither one of us are really known to everybody else. And so to be able to reach voters with mailers at their home, digital and social media and different events, every dollar I always equate to, it's about $1 every voter we get to reach out and communicate with. But as you know, you got to communicate with a voter 7 or 8 times in different ways to get them to, oh, there's an election, 17 February, early voting. And that's where we could use it. So kopserfortexas.com. And I really do appreciate your endorsement, especially for all you've done for Texas in service, both seeking higher office, but also in the private sector, building companies yourself.
Well, listen, I'm honored that you would give us your time. I've followed you through this whole career in politics. Man, I would love to see you in this seat. So I wish you the very best. And if you're listening right now, or you're watching, I'm telling you, Joseph Kopser is the real deal. He really is. You can trust him. He's the leader that we need right now. We need this style of leadership in our state legislature more than ever. So kopserfortexas.com. Joseph, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.